Americans.
Good morning, this is CJ Holmes, founder of Homeowners for Justice, your host today for Weekdays Live. And boy, more bank news. It's amazing how every day seems to bring so much news about what the banks are doing and what the people are doing to protect themselves, fight back, make changes, and try to bring to life the new paradigm of supporting the people. Just like that slide said, we just looked at. In the end, I'm going to back up to that so you can read it with me. The issue which has swept down the centuries and will have to be fought sooner or later is the people versus the banks. So it doesn't mean that all banking is wrong or bad. It means that banking, the ability to create credit for private profit, which is the Federal Reserve and all the mega banks, that's what they're doing, private profit. They're lining their pockets at our expense. But if we have the credit creation for public benefit, then you and I, the people, can benefit from this massive credit creation. It's truly public banking to the rescue. And today we're going to have with us Mark Armstrong, Executive Director of the Public Banking Institute. He's been on a long 5-week trip. It's going to be really exciting. They've got a Public Banking Institute meeting, a convention in June that we want to talk to him about, and all of those other things. But before we do that, let's take a look at what's in the news. Get ready. Here we go. So the Housing Administration, that's FHA, thinks we're going to need a $943 million bailout from the people, from you, from me. So now we have another federal agency who actually, it's rather scary actually, because it says that down here in the article that they have, I think, like $1 trillion in loans that they're guaranteeing. This is truly possibly another agency run amok. And literally, I do believe that we need to be thinking about and strategizing how can we get financing, home financing, in a different model. We need something else. So, is the Fed blowing a new housing bubble? Here's an article, and then I'm going to have a little video real quick about the fact that prices are rising faster than incomes. Here we go again. And over the past year, the Federal Reserve has ramped up its policy of quantitative easing. And the result is the stock market is new highs, surging bond prices, housing prices jumped 8%, the biggest annual gain since 2006. And so the result is more than $1 trillion have been added to the market value of single-family homes, which makes people feel more wealthy. And the powers that be who are trying to fix this fiasco, I swear, they think if the people feel more wealthy, then the people are going to spend more money, and we'll grow our way out of this problem. But of course, they don't believe, the others like you and me don't believe that the housing price rises are being driven by a broad-based improvement in the economy's fundamentals. Of course it's not. I mean, we still have 20 million people, or however many million people, are looking for a job, a full-time job. And we've got healthcare costs increasing, all these other drags against housing prices. They just feel that the Fed's low rates and the quantitative easing just creating more dollars, chasing fewer assets. That's why the prices are rising. I do believe that's true, and I do believe at some point what goes up will come down. Let's remember the lessons of just a few years ago. Here's proof. Listen to these people.
Applications for home mortgages actually rose last week, driven by improved refinance demand as interest rates tumbled. With home prices rising much faster than incomes, though, a rise in rates would very quickly put home ownership out of reach for a lot of people. Several key players in the mortgage industry were questioned on Capitol Hill today. Diana Olick covers the housing industry. And Diana, that average 30-year fixed, it's sitting at 3.68. And homes have been affordable to this point. But is there fear out there that that's about to change?
There definitely is, Becky, because when you look at it, people say, oh, homes are so affordable today because home prices fell so much. But at the same time as home prices were falling, incomes and wages were falling as well. So affordability was really about these record low mortgage rates, government induced. Now you see home prices rising so much, but you don't see incomes and wages rising at the same pace. In fact, they're flat or falling in some places. So now you have the fear that it's all based on these record low mortgage rates. In fact, Americans collectively are paying 37% less in their monthly mortgage payments than they did on a historical average, while home prices historically relative to income are 14% higher. That's all according to Zillow. So what those numbers mean is if mortgage rates start to rise even a little bit over the next couple of years, which they certainly will, then housing affordability is going to become really tough and price a lot of people out of the market.
Yeah, I know big hope is that the housing market makes some massive recovery before then. But I also know that there's been this big push and pull from the government. The government wants to make sure that at this point the banks are loosening the purse strings, trying to make sure more people can get mortgages because they think too many people have been left out. But through the FHA, if they're doing that, it creates some big new potential problems, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible argument they're making. They're trying to tell the banks, look, loosen up, use the FHA, don't worry so much about all these putbacks and lawsuits that we, the government, have been throwing at you, because if you make these good loans through the FHA, you're good to go. Well, guess what? The FHA is still bleeding cash. In fact, we learned today from the budget that it may need an up to $1 billion bailout, which would be the first time in its 80-year history. Then you have a hearing on the Hill today with everybody saying, shore up the FHA. We need to protect it. We need to increase premiums. We need to increase credit scores. So on the one hand, you have the government telling banks, loosen up, use the FHA. On the other hand, you have government saying, tighten it up. So really, there's no answer at this point until they have to see home prices rise. They have to see the housing market in a real solid recovery. That's what's going to make the banks lend more.
And I guess, Diana, this is making for some testy testimony today, some back and forth with the FHA and Capitol Hill.
Testimony, Becky. We love that, of course. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't there be, especially when you have the budget come out saying that about the FHA?
Right. Diana, thank you very much. Diana Olick.
Classic, isn't it? We have the two different facets of, who's going to do the funding, use the FHA, except FHA is bleeding cash. We need higher prices. We need stability, except what they're ignoring. Let's never, ever forget. Everybody that lost a home to foreclosure and short sale does not qualify for a loan from the bank. I've got clients all over the place. They have great income. They have great cash reserves. They had to sell short. Was it their fault the market fell? No. So they are forced into a default position. So they sell the house short and now they can't get a loan for 3 years. That's insane. And that's the rule. And so we've locked out millions of qualified buyers. So who fills the gap? Cash. Cash is flowing in from all over the world, including local people, family groups in particular. They're buying for family members as cash. They're saying, I'm not getting anything in savings, so let's just buy some property. And that's a valid and probably very solid decision. But the issue is they've locked out the actual people that would stabilize the home market, and they never talk about it. It's mind-boggling, and it really is amazing that there isn't somebody like common sense that understands real estate talking to these people and explaining it to them. I could fix this overnight. We could just have the FHA change the rules and insist that that be held for 3 years, because if the banks understood that they would, if they made loans to these people, the FHA would continue to buy them for 3 years, then suddenly we'd have us swamped with qualified buyers coming back into the market. And then the banks could release all that shadow inventory. They got millions, probably 2 or 3 million homes sitting on the sidelines, locked out of that market because they don't feel there's enough buyers. Anyway, next. Okay, so now we're talking about the Federal Reserve has leaks, and let's never ever forget who owns the Federal Reserve. It is not the people and it's not the government, it's the banks that own the Federal Reserve. Let's remember that. And so of course they got the minutes early. You kidding me? And of course they blame it off on a leak. So here's an article about it. I'm going to play just a couple of minutes of a video about it. It's really classic. And of course, 12 banks got this early, plus staffers. And what's really classic about this video, it's really embarrassing. They never ever address the fact that they're claiming, give me a break. They're claiming they don't know when the email was sent. Are you kidding? It says on every email exactly when it's sent and when it's received. I don't believe this for a minute. They're just saying this stuff, hoping they can get away with it. And the smarter the people are, the less they're going to get away with it.
Let's shift to bonds and the dollar. Rick Singhtali for CME Group in Chicago. Go ahead, Rick.
Good morning. And before we get to the charts, let's look at some important points out of Europe we want to pay attention to.
Whoops, wrong video. Sorry. I'll see if I can find the correct video. I thought that was the right one, but anyway, the fact is they released it early. They couldn't tell if it was before the market opened or closed. I don't believe that for a minute. I believe they're just backpedaling as fast as possible because, you know, in the information age, we know these things quickly. They can be tweeted around the world in just a nanosecond. And the fact of the matter is, obviously, somebody leaked this information. And they don't want to say who and they don't want to say when. They just want to try to cover it up and hope it goes away. It's up to us to hold their feet to the fire. So today, you already heard this mentioned on the earlier video, that the big bankers, these are Damone, JP Morgan Chase, Brian Moynihan, Bank of America, Michael Corbat of Citigroup, they're all going to meet with Obama, and they're going to be talking about stuff, and you better believe it is not going to be about the independent foreclosure review, how they've cheated the borrowers, how they've cheated the rules, how they've, done fraudulent foreclosures. They're never going to talk about that. And that's one of the problems. Their feet aren't being held to the fire. Now, here's, speaking about the independent foreclosure review, notice that Ally Bank, and let's never forget that Ally used to be GMAC, they have done an aggressive campaign to avoid even being involved in this. They're actually fighting. They did not join the independent foreclosure review. They're doing lawsuits. They don't want to pay for this. They don't want to admit it. And they're basically thinking they're going to get off. And they're probably right. It's up to the people to hold their feet to the fire. And we're going to need some real massive connection with real people to recognize that the fraud and the cheating going on in the foreclosure paperwork and then the review and the bank's complete efforts to stave off all liability does affect everybody in the country. That is key to getting the people involved. Now, I thought you need to know this. That's why I'm telling you. The national rates drop, but many states see increases. And so, some places are much lower, other places are increasing. And even if the foreclosure rates drop, the starts are up. And that's not good news for the future. So here's some charts. As you can see, the foreclosure starts are the light brown. See how they're going up? The foreclosure completions are the red. And they're talking about how starts are now climbing. This is as of January 2013, this last number. And they're talking here about the state laws, how they've increased non-judicial timelines. Well, yeah, they don't have California here. California just started in January 2013. And I wish that they had put them. They just have Nevada, Oregon, and Washington on this chart. I'd love to see what's happening in California. But I'm confident it'll be the same kind of thing. And that is when these laws take effect, see, you can actually see how this is the timeline. How long does it take to foreclose? And so the timeline has been increasing. In other words, it's harder for the banks to do a foreclosure. People are able to fight back and stave off. I call it delay and stay. And hopefully, this is what we need to do. We need to just stop the machine. We already know that every foreclosure paperwork is fraudulent. So let's stop these foreclosures. Not everyone. All of the foreclosures for securitized loans. Any loan that was securitized, they have to fake the paperwork to foreclose. So let's stop the machines and let's force them to do a settlement. Let's keep the people in their homes. That is the point. So here is something that Sherrod Brown is trying to do. His little website. There we go. I'll open it up so you can see his name. He's got some legislation, and it's breaking up the banks. And this legislation is gaining steam. And I've already received an email from a contact. Evidently, some people are saying, no, this is not what we want. I have not had time to even look at the legislation to even know what it says. But what they're doing is crafting a bill that requires banks with more than $400 billion in assets. And let's never forget that some of these banks have $1 trillion in assets. I mean, these numbers really start to get sort of scary because they are market makers. We talk about that all the time. And they will be market breakers. Any market maker can break a market. And that is real scary. So what they're saying is they want this bill evidently would hold at least 15% of those assets in hard capital. And the senators hope to encourage the handful of multi-trillion-dollar behemoths to split up into smaller firms. Okay, my first take is the banks, it is too profitable for the CEOs doing what they're doing. So it is not in their vested interest to break up the banks. So is that going to happen? I sincerely doubt it. We're going about this the wrong way. We need to put the CEOs in prison for all of their fraudulent shenanigans and break up the banks ourselves. That would work. Now, here's a little video I really want you to pay attention to, because what this talks about is in Europe, and the concept of the local banks and what local banks do and how it's so much more healthy for the economy to have a bunch of small local banks than these huge giants. And what is true in Europe is true in the US. It is true everywhere in the world. It's a very interesting little discussion here.
Professor Werner, one might assume that in a capitalistic market system, all credit needs would be very simply met. But the reports are that in Britain, anyway, small and medium-sized businesses are unable to obtain credit. This must hold back growth. Does it point to something being wrong with the UK banking system, do you think?
Right. Well, let's keep in mind that banks have been given a crucial task in the economy, which at the same time is a privilege. Banks in all countries at the moment have been given the privilege to create the money supply and allocate the money as they see fit. Now, over time, of course, this accumulation of credit allocation decisions by banks will shape the economy.
Right.
Now, despite this crucial role and this long-term impact on the economic landscape, banks weren't told when they were given this privilege to create and allocate the money supply, now go out and do this wisely. They weren't told to do that, and of course what they've been doing is really just look after their own interests.
Right.
As it turns out, they can't even look after themselves. Just look at the banking crisis. So this just shows the great need for banks to receive help from the government in making sure that what they do is good for the banking system in the long run, is sustainable, and most importantly, is good for the economy. Now, when we look at particular countries, say the UK, we find that each country has certain national characteristics in the structure of the banking system.
Okay.
In many ways, the UK is an extreme case.
All right.
But let's just compare the UK with another major economy in Europe, Germany. When we look at the UK banking system, we notice that about 90% of deposits, 90% of the banking market is accounted for by 5 banks. So we have a highly concentrated banking system. These are the 5 main high street banks. And of course, the trouble is when you have so few very, very large banks, and of course also large internationally, they also do business outside the UK, then as a large firm, as a large profit-oriented player, they want to deal with large customers. And that means UK small firms are not very high on their list. In fact, they're more or less a hassle. Because, of course, the cost in terms of doing due diligence and credit analysis of a small firm that wants £20,000 loan is about the same as for a large firm that wants £200 million loan.
Right.
But, of course, if you focus only on the big projects, you're neglecting something in the economy. The economy will become much more centralized. The big banks deal mainly with the big firms. And of course, the local economy, regional growth will be neglected.
Right.
And small firms and also startup firms have a very hard time getting funding. And this has been a problem in the UK. Now, let's compare with Germany.
Can I? So just to recap, in the UK, in sort of marketing terms, the marketing credit doesn't really seem to work because the scale of the main suppliers is a mismatch to the local small needs.
Absolutely.
That's right. A marketing failure.
Yes, well, that's of course because the banks just look after what's good for them, and for the banks,
that's the way it is.
It's most attractive and most profitable to only deal with the large firms, so they're not interested in dealing with the small firms. But at the same time, the banks have succeeded through their lobbying, and they're the biggest provider of political campaign money in most countries in the world, also in the UK. They've succeeded in suppressing a whole alternative banking system which is local and small scale. So if we compare the UK with Germany, you find that so what's the 5-6 high street banks accounting for 90% of banking in the UK. In Germany actually is only around 12% of the banking market, and so it's therefore very small. The high street banks in total account for only 12% of the banking market.
Right.
Whereas the majority of banking is actually supplied by many small local banks. Banks with local headquarters. Not a headquarter in London, but say locally in Winchester, there'd be several banks with their headquarters here. That would be sort of the system in Germany. And of course, because each bank is smaller, it's quite happy, in fact, needs to deal with small customers, and therefore you get a much more diverse economy where local craftsmanship, medium-sized firms, family-owned firms get the support from their banks that they need in the local economy.
And so what that means is the local banks need the local business, which is what the people need. So really, we need to focus on local solutions. I'd like to welcome Mark Armstrong to our show. Mark, you're on the air. He's Executive Director with Public Banking Institute, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And we just saw a little quick discussion about the power of local banking over in Germany versus the centralized effect of the mega banks. They're big, they need big profits, they deal with big companies, forget the little guys. And I believe that local banking and local public banking is probably a real solution for the people. So with that introduction, tell us how long you've been with Public Banking Institute and bring us up to speed on what's happening.
Yeah, hi CJ. So the Public Banking Institute's been around for a little over 2 years now. It's a grassroots organization. There were a number of us at a conference in 2009 that was put on by the Praxis Peace organization, and out of that conference came widespread sentiment to have some sort of a organization that touted and discussed the merits of public banking. And we talked about that for over a year, and finally said, well, nobody else is going to do it, so we put together our own nonprofit, and our objective is to educate about public banking and to advocate for banks are transnational, what happens is that money is used to buy securities in manufacturing firms in China or Brazilian bonds. It basically leaves the communities in which the taxes were paid in the first place. And so the core value proposition behind public banking is to put those tax revenues into publicly owned or government-owned banks at the local level, whether it's county or state, and then use the credit that's generated to fund either infrastructure investments or to avoid having to do any sort of municipal bond issuance where you're paying interest, and also to provide a commercial loan portfolio to build up small independent businesses. So that's the idea behind public banking.
That sounds really great, Mark. How would public banks, and you're speaking in terms of at the local level, right? Either county or state level? What about cities? What do you mean when you say a local public bank? What are you guys talking about mostly?
Well, cities have the same idea. You have the government owning the bank. There are a handful of cities that are looking at it right now. Philadelphia is probably moving the quickest with that. There was testimony given just last Thursday in a city council hearing, and we provided testimony, and there's some sentiment to actually pass a resolution this summer to create a public bank in Philadelphia. Something similar is going on in Boston as well as Toronto, and so there's it would only work for larger cities like that, maybe San Francisco as well. But and Supervisor John Avalos in San Francisco is a big public banking supporter. But you because of the scaling issues, you need to have a large city. You can't have a town of 20,000 people put together a public bank. The numbers just don't add up. So it makes sense for larger cities or counties.
Now, Mark, I've got up on the screen the flyer that Public Banking Institute has created, Why Public Banks? And I'm just going down, looking at the list of some of the benefits. And can you tell us how a public bank would actually get started? Let's say that a county, we've got people viewing this from around the country. So let's say at the county level, because it would probably make sense enough at each county, correct? It would be big enough to handle a public bank?
Yeah, counties that have a strong economic base. So Sonoma County is a good example. That has a strong economic base. A county that is more of a residential county without jobs, but more just housing, that doesn't make too much sense. So it's got to have a diverse economy. And Sonoma County, Mendocino County, and other counties like that make a lot of sense, where you have both urban and rural areas. So you can support industry as well as agriculture. And the way to start a bank is really simple. A lot of people get stuck on this, and I just want to be real clear that it's akin to obtaining a liquor license, in the sense that you need to have an organization, you need to have a corporation that basically is going to function as the bank, and then you need to, and in the case of a public bank, it would be a government-owned corporation, and there are plenty of attorneys who know how to draw up the papers for something like this, and that corporation needs to have a license. It needs to have a banking license. There are two ways to get a banking license. You either apply for it from the State Department of Financial Institutions, which is an extended process, or you use the capital that's been put into that corporation to buy a failing private bank, and you obtain the license that way. So again, it's very much like a liquor license, where you actually need to obtain the right or the privilege in order to practice banking. So it's those two steps. It's forming the corporation as well as obtaining the license. But I want to just underscore, the issue is not how to do it. The issue is how to build the political will to do it.
Right.
Okay, so right. That's where the focus should be, and it's a grassroots organizing effort. It's education. It's lining up the power players. It's lining up the coalition. It's discussing this in a way so that people understand it, and so that's where the effort really needs to be put into.
Now, and truly, I agree with you, Mark, and it's all about the people understanding. And I've been trying to express the concept that if if the public bank, they do make a profit, and then those profits go back into the general fund. And so the people can benefit from the profit that's generated by the banking industry, or the public banks in particular, rather than lining somebody else's pockets. And I have here on the screen right now that the State Development Bank supports lowest unemployment and foreclosure rates in the U.S. And these are this is on the brochure about redevelopment, and they would create new jobs. Like you mentioned in passing that if the public bank was there, it would the credit created through that banking structure could be used for infrastructure and for maintenance, and so the counties and the cities would not have to go to the municipal bond market, correct?
Yeah, so a good case in point is here in California. There's a report that just came out 3 months ago, and it was on capital appreciation bonds. That is a product, it's a toxic product that is sold by Wall Street investment banks, and it's sold to school districts in our state. And it has not been prohibited from being sold because the state legislature allows it, the state treasurer allows it. But here's what it looks like. Over the last 6 or 7 years, over $9 billion has been financed and provided to these school districts to build schools or whatever they need in order to continue providing educational services in their respective areas. So $9 billion has been financed. And the nature of these bonds are that they don't have to be paid back for 20 or 25 years to the next generation of taxpayers. The interest that will be due in that amount of time will be over $25 billion, in addition to the $9 billion of principal.
Huh.
What we could have done if we had a state bank of California is use our existing balances that are in private banks, use our existing balance of liquid capital, which liquid deposits, which are in private banks right now, and use that to create credit, which could have financed the entire $9 billion. We have an average daily balance of over $17 billion in this state. And why we're not using it for the public's benefit is beyond me. What we're doing is giving that credit away to private banks, who then turn around and lend us the money that's generated out of that credit at exorbitant rates or in products like the capital appreciation bonds. So that's the bottom line question is, would you rather pay interest to out-of-state bankers, or would you rather pay interest to yourselves? Because when you pay interest to yourselves, it's a zero-sum game. It's basically net zero cost for the costs of borrowing that money from yourself. It's like putting money from one pocket into the other.
Well, it's sort of like borrowing from an IRA, right? If you will. I mean, a person...
Exactly. I mean,
yeah.
Well, in a sense. But we're talking about bank credit, which is
exactly.
From the double use of the double entry accounting system. This is the license that a bank has. They have the right to create bank credit. You and I do not do that. We have to take money from, one account and lend it out, from our piggy bank and lend it out. We don't create bank credit that way. Because of a double entry accounting system, banks can actually hold onto your deposits and loan out the same amount of money. And they're basically doubling the amount of money that's in circulation.
Right. They're generating the credit, but it stays local, right? And
that's correct. Yeah.
And let's just imagine that we had a county bank, and the bank they have their own reserves, and we've talked. I saw on one of these overheads that I've been showing on the screen while you've been chatting that. Pension funds, part of the pension funds, the accounts that the county and even the cities have could be put into the public banking and used as reserves, or some of that. And again, I'm not sure I'm completely accurate, but the fact of the matter is they could generate enough credit to, let's say, refurbish all the streets, whatever is needed in that community, that county. And they could loan themselves that credit at either 0 or 1%, right? Whatever they chose to do.
Yes, there are some costs involved, but yes, you've got the right idea.
Yeah.
The bank in North Dakota loans money at 1% to commercial businesses.
To commercial businesses, not even just itself, but it loans it at 1% to commercial businesses?
That's correct.
Oh my goodness. So why aren't all the local businesses on board and the local banks? Tell me, before you answer that, tell me the benefits to the local banks. Like, for example, in Sonoma County, we have a local Exchange Bank is a local bank. So how would the public bank benefit Exchange Bank?
Well, there are a number of things that are considered to be benefits to local community banks. One of the primary things is that what they do in North Dakota is they have all these loan programs. They have 26 loan programs, and they route them through commercial banks or community banks that are at the local level. So what happens is the bankers get to do all the loan origination. They get the loan origination fees. They improve their profitability. They keep their largest customers because they've got a larger pool of money to fund those customers as opposed to going to Wells Fargo. And so you end up in a situation where the community banks act as the middleman between these loan programs and the public. Now compare that to what's happened in Sonoma County, where there are loan programs in place, and I'm thinking about the Sonoma County Energy Independent Program, Skype. That loan program is in place because there was a need in the market that private banks were not providing credit for. And so government stepped in, local government stepped in and said, you know what, we need to provide home energy efficiency type program to people. And through a bond measure and through some creative financing and underwriting ability, they were able to provide this to the community, and it's been a very successful program. Now, what's interesting about it is that here you have nearly $50 million that's been lent out under the Skype program. And the government is lending it out directly to the people of Sonoma County. In a sense, the government is competing with community banks, the way that we're doing business right now. And I think it'd be far better to have programs like that and many others, which is what they do in North Dakota. They have 25 other programs, which they run through community banks. So the Skype program could actually be a loan program that people could apply to from their existing community banks, like Exchange Bank or Redwood Credit Union, whatever it may be, and be able to get funding for that and at a low rate. So you end up with the community bank being successful. You get money into the hands of the people who need it in order to retrofit their homes. You lower the carbon footprint of the people in Sonoma County, and it's all by using bank credit in a creative way. The nature of private banking is that they do not want to start these loan programs because they're considered to be too risky. But as with the Skype program in Sonoma County, as well as the many other loan programs examples that are in other states, where you have government entities coming up with some original and they're taking the initiative with these loan programs. These are all loan programs that are expanding the economy, whether it's the new economy of sustainability, et cetera, or funding co-ops, things like that. Good luck trying to get a private bank to fund a co-op. But if there's a government loan program to do that through a public bank, and it was incenting community banks to get engaged, then you end up with a win-win-win for everyone.
Absolutely. Well, everyone except the mega banks, and who cares right now about them?
Yeah, they don't get their public deposits. And, since we're talking about that, let's talk about risk. These mega banks have already failed. They failed in 2008.
Yeah.
It was the taxpayers who stepped forward and saved them. So, it is not, people think that public banking is too risky because it's different. We're already halfway there. We're already underwriting mega banks. It's socialized losses, private gains. We're just saying, look, let's be realistic. These mega banks are really not doing much of a favor at all to the communities in which this tax revenue is generated. Let's just put it into private banks. It's a lot safer there. You're actually putting the money into a bank that you can control, and you will not have a Cyprus-like incident happen where your money is in a private bank, and then the private bank turns around and says, well, thanks for being our creditor. We're going to take 40% of that and turn it into a stock certificate, so now you're an investor in our bank. That's exactly what happened in Cyprus. That would not happen with a public bank. And so our money's at risk, frankly, basically by having it be put into these large transnational mega banks that have the ability to do something like that.
Absolutely. And Mark, I think I've heard you say in the past that the public bank would not have people's personal checking accounts, checking and savings accounts, right? Wouldn't they be interacting with the local private regional banks and credit unions? Because
a public bank, the model in North Dakota is really to be a wholesale bank or a banker's bank. So you end up providing all these loan programs that are run through community banks, and there's no retail or ATM associated with the bank. It's on a few cubicles in the county administrative building, and that's it. You're basically just you have this license to create bank credit, and then you're packaging it up into loan programs. That's the nature of a public bank along the lines of a banker's bank or a Bank of North Dakota. It's up to the people to decide if they want to have a retail bank, but I don't think I would suggest it. The reason why is because you end up with all these onerous restrictions from Dodd-Frank, from the FDIC, et cetera, and you might as well just serve the community's needs on the credit side of the balance sheet, not by providing depository type services. Now, the only exception to that I would suggest is to have a national public bank, such as the U.S. Post Office, which already provides some financial service products, money orders and things like that. And just this morning, the headline was in the UK was that they are turning their post offices into a depository bank. So it will provide checking services to people who who open accounts with their post office. We'd like to do the same thing in this country. It'll kill a few birds with one stone. It'll increase the profitability of the post office. It'll bring them into the 21st century at least. I mean, but some countries have been providing postal banking services for decades. As a matter of fact, our own used to provide banking services until 1967. And there's over 10 million people who are unbanked in this country. And a postal bank could actually provide a lot of good services for them in a risk-free type environment. I mean, you don't extend credit; you simply provide banking services to them.
Right.
If you look at different parts of the country and look where the footprint is for private banks, those private banks are always where the money is. Here in Sonoma Valley, where I live, the private banks cluster around the downtown square area where there's a lot of money. Now, contrast that with the footprint of a post office. Within Sonoma Valley, there must be 7 or 8 different post offices, all clustered where the people are, not necessarily where the money is.
Right.
Those post offices were turned into providing additional banking services. You'd end up with a situation of people would have much more convenient access to their money, and banking services as well as the post office would make some money by providing that to them.
Oh, this is really a cool concept. That's the first time I've heard of it. So the issue is, I just want to make sure that people understand that if we had a public bank at the county level or state level, but the public bank would not have retail accounts. So people's checking and savings could never be confiscated anyway, because they wouldn't be in those banks, not like Cyprus, or like if you have like we could fear definitely in the public or private banks right here in this country. We already know. Ellen already wrote that letter. That article, I showed it yesterday, about how the haircut, the confiscation of our checking and savings accounts in these mega banks is already in place. That facility is already there. It's not if, it's when, in my book, that they're going to need this bail-in, and so they're going to take the money. And it would be fabulous to be able to protect ourselves somehow with that, against that.
The U.S. Postal Bank would do that. You end up with a national banking franchise, which is guaranteed by the U.S. government. I mean, a system like that cannot fail. Of course, there's risk with it, but because it's not issuing credit, it's simply providing banking services. the money is going to be there.
And it's not gambling. It's not gambling. It's not commingling.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
these
The postal bank is not going to be, investing in derivatives. That's for sure.
Exactly, and losing billions of investors' dollars because they commingled their accounts, and now, oops, that was gone on a margin call or something, like the MF Global fiasco. So
Exactly.
truly, when we look at risk without blinders on, we say, gee, we're already backstopping these private banks who, like, I really appreciate what you say. They failed in 2008. That is the point. They failed. We've bailed them out. And now, of course, they've got the rules now that they can be bailed out on derivatives. I mean, it's truly a nightmare just waiting to happen. And if we could somehow shift over to like the U.S. postal national banking system, that is really a cool idea. What would it take to make that happen?
Well, that's with the postal system. That's a whole nother can of worms. But and so it's focused more on D.C. What we can do now, and what is within our control, is to basically lobby the county treasurer as well as anybody who is associated with any sort of fiscal oversight within the county with regards to public monies. And we can make the case that public banks are less risky and that it's their fiduciary responsibility to examine what the role is of Sonoma County relative to one of these large transnational banks in which the money is placed. And the reason why is because up till now, we used to think that, well, if you put your money into a bank, you're the depositor. And you have a claim. You basically can get that money back.
Right.
Cyprus has proved that when you put your money into a bank, you are a creditor. You are loaning money to that bank.
That's right.
And what's ironic is that public banking is criticized because a lot of people, government officials say, you know what, we cannot loan out money. But that's exactly what they're doing right now with large private banks. They're loaning our tax receipts,
That's right,
our tax dollars, to large transnational banks. And that is a very risky proposition with these Wall Street banks because of their track record.
Well, absolutely. And so now we're loaning money to these mega banksters without any control over what they do with it. They commingle it. They gamble with it on Wall Street. They make a bad move.
Why not put it in our own bank and have some transparency and accountability and fundamentally the control we need in order to serve the public interest, period. That's the value proposition behind a public bank.
Now, Mark, I wanted to tell you, I had a meeting with there's some really excellent activists in Mendocino County, and they got a couple of supervisors together. We went up there were about 13 of us in the room, and we were talking about the public banking, and it became the supervisors, when I said this, they nodded their heads and said, absolutely, we'd go public bank in a heartbeat, without any questions, if you got the local regional private banks to sign off on it. If the local regional small private banks went to the supervisors and said, we want a public bank, they would do it. So what can we do to connect with our local regional banks? And here's a question before you answer that. Would that include the credit unions? Is it credit unions and regional banks that could benefit from the public banking?
Yes, it would include the credit unions. And I think it's a two-step process. First, the capitalization question needs to be answered. Where does the money come from to fund a bank that's the size of, let's say, $100 million? Where does the $10 million of capital come from for something like that? And we're working on a paper which actually is going to take the existing model that's been proven and in Sonoma County and elsewhere, and with revenue bonds, and use it to fund and capitalize a public bank. So we're gonna take a proven model, apply it to a public bank, and use it for capitalization of that public bank. So that question will be answered. Then the question is, what is there political will on the part of the existing bankers and credit unions to actually support something like this? And that's a hard thing to line up. I've had a number of different discussions with different bankers, and We do have, Alta Vista, Alta Pacific Bank in Sonoma County has gone on record. The founder of that bank has gone on record in support of a public bank in Sonoma County, and we'll get more people like that as time goes on. And so, especially with credit unions, because people have a vote with credit unions, there can be a grassroots type petition or something like that. If you're a member of a credit union, you can actually use that avenue. So, a couple of different ways to do this.
Now, Mark, here's an idea I had, because you said early on in this discussion, you mentioned the 26 loan programs. Was that in North Dakota, I guess? The public banking is routing through in conjunction with the private bank. So they're loaning to commercial businesses. Can you just sort of briefly overview what those 26 programs are? Do you have those listed anywhere? What are they?
Oh, it's on the Bank of North Dakota website. Just Google lending services, Bank of North Dakota, and it'll come up. And there's a complete description of all these programs. They have programs where for every $100,000 that you borrow, you have to hire somebody. So it's kind of a jobs program and a lending program in one. They have other programs that are incenting technology startups to start in the state of North Dakota, and they'll lend upwards to, I think it's $500,000 to those kind of to provide seed funding. This is truly seed funding for a technology startup. They have other programs which is to incent agricultural interest to use irrigation technology on fields that it hasn't been used on before. So they've got specific loan programs for that. They've got loan programs for light manufacturers, and because it's capital intensive, what they'll do is they'll buy down the interest rate from 5 or 6% down to 1% for 3 or 4 years until you're at full utilization of the equipment that you just purchased. So it's a lot easier to pay back the loan. I mean, I could go on and on. They're all listed there. These are all loan programs that are targeting how to expand the economy in North Dakota. And we have one in Sonoma County. They have 26 in North Dakota. I would make the case that we can do a few more, particularly since our economy is a little more diverse. There's probably more unique needs associated with what our business folks need. So yeah, that's some information. You can Google lending services and Bank of North Dakota, and it'll come up.
I already did. I did that while you were talking. And the fact is, I've got that up here on the site. Here's lending services. They do farm ranch financing programs, business financing programs, commercial, small business, guarantee programs for businesses, incentive programs, new venture capital program, government guaranteed loans for lenders, community.
What happens, CJ, is in other parts of the country, we say, well, the free market should decide. Well, the free market is really comprised of a few bank officers
That's right.
who may be in New York City deciding on what the loan portfolio in California is going to look like. That's the extent of our free market here.
Exactly.
And the North Dakotans say, you know what, we've got a better idea. We're going to figure out how to grow our economy, and we're not going to do it with taxpayer dollars. We're going to do it with bank credit.
It makes
We can
such
do the same thing here in
sense.
Sonoma County.
It's such sense. And besides, you were commenting about private banking can't start the loan programs because they're deemed as too risky. I also wanted to mention when you said that many of the private banks, if not all of them, are probably still under the FDIC auspices because of this crisis. And so they were telling me, this was at least a couple of years ago and probably still happening, that every quarter FDIC people were coming in and looking at all of their portfolios and saying, well, you can't loan to this anymore, to this type of housing or to this kind of commercial, because we got to keep your portfolio balanced.
They don't do that in North Dakota. The FDIC is not involved with the Bank of North Dakota.
But they are with the local private banks. So these banks are just so hamstrung that not only do maybe the bank boards look at things, but as risky, or if we would like to get into that or not, they have to get this approved by an agency, a federal agency. So it's just is completely hamstrung.
Again, my point is that if most of the money is coming from the Bank of North Dakota, then that approval is not really needed.
Right.
To the extent you think.
Oh, that would be so fabulous. I have Have you guys put together yet any brochure about how much money and business increase the like Exchange Bank or the Redwood Credit Union? I'm thinking of local banks and credit unions, so people can just substitute that. Who's local in your area? Have you put a brochure together of the benefits and how much money they would make if they supported a public bank in their community?
Yeah, I've got a brochure on it's called Why Public Banking, and it's got 3 bullets for community banks, why they'd be interested. The actual amount of money they're going to make is going to depend upon the size of the public bank, and so it's really hard to answer. But usually their portfolios, at least in North Dakota, the portfolio for a community bank grows from anywhere from 5 to 10 or 12% because of Bank of North Dakota loans. You end up with this bump in profitability, and 10%, whatever it may be, it adds up over the years.
Is that annual growth, or is that an initial start?
It's a balance sheet, so it's 5 to 10%, 5 to 12% of their existing size of their loan portfolio is higher because of Bank of North Dakota deal.
Well, I would think that makes total sense, and again, it's a good banking neighbor. That means they're helping the local economy. The other thing I just love about public banking, besides the complete benefit that the people get to benefit from the credit creation instead of having that just siphoned out into some mega bankers' pockets like Jamie Dimon, it just galls me to think that, they are pulling, these mega banks are just sucking the lifeblood out of this country, because the planet, that's what they're doing. And so besides keeping the credit for the public benefit, it's that it also benefits local jobs, local businesses. I mean, it grows locally and we keep it local. And that's when you start doing that everywhere, then local people and economies are much stronger and can withstand maybe some of these assaults from the federal level until we can get that straightened out.
Right. Well, we're all doing our best. We've got our conference coming up on June 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in San Rafael in partnership with Dominican University. And we're having national speakers come in to talk about public banking, the new economy, how to fund it. Jeff Thigpen is going to be talking from North Carolina. The county recorder is going to be talking about his lawsuits and what he's doing in order to restore justice to the justice system, because as you know, the county recorder's records are the foundation of justice in our society. I mean, those documents are recorded and certified, and so if they're fraudulent at the core, it's a mess, and you can't build a justice system around that. So he'll be talking about that.
Yep, and like we've said before, when they've messed up the property records, then they've messed up the ownership, the chain of title of who owns what, and it's ruined that for everybody now in the country. And I believe personally that cleaning that mess up is going to take, if it gets done, it's going to take some really broad strokes, because literally the bankers have filed millions and millions of fraudulent and forged documents. It's coming out. Some of the foreclosure trust emails are already being indicted. But it's not enough yet to stop all of it, which is just insane to me, because as soon as they indicted one foreclosure trust email for fraudulent documents, why didn't they stop all foreclosures? I don't understand that. So they allow this to continue. All of our property records are basically ruined, and that is the basis of ownership of property for the people. And this is a true dilemma. And of course, people like Jeff are standing up and filing lawsuits, and some are winning and some are not, and that's also discouraging and frustrating to the people. So when is that? Tell us when the public banking conference is taking place.
All the information is at publicbanking.org.
Yeah, I've got it up on the screen.
June 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. We have an evening session on the 2nd involving Matt Taibbi. He'll be talking about how to reclaim our economy from Wall Street. And there'll be a number of other people including Victoria Grant, the 13-year-old gal from Canada who will be speaking. And then
Yes.
on Monday night, the 3rd, and by the way, the Sunday night session is just $35. It's a special session. Monday night it's going to be a free session, and it's all about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement and how that's basically declaring war on our new economy, on sustainability, on any sort of buy local effort that's being put forth by governments, as well as on public banking. And so we're going to have a panel. It's going to be a forum, and we'll be talking a lot about sovereignty and basically the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, which is coming in. It's incoming. It's going to be landing at our doorstep any day now, and we need to be aware of the many restrictions within that agreement.
Yeah. Always something more to fight back against. I tell
They're
you,
relentless, aren't they?
it does feel relentless, and that is also one of the escapes. The people need to take a breath. We need to have a break. I feel relentless because I get swamped personally with so many people saying, my foreclosure sales date's coming up again, and it's relentless. And literally the people need to join together. We need to support public banking. We need to change the paradigm. We need to put the people back in control. I just really appreciate you, Mark, joining us.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend that everyone consider doing? What is one thing that each person viewing and listening to this right now could actually do to help move this effort forward? Do you have any great ideas for us right now?
If somebody does not want to come to the conference or attend some of the sessions, and it's all on our website, publicbanking.org, the one thing that people can do is to call the county recorder, whether it's Mendocino, Sonoma, Marin, wherever it may be. Call the county recorder and say it's your fiduciary responsibility to examine the role of the county as being a creditor when public deposits are made into those Wall Street banks. Because what happens is we do become a creditor. We're essentially an investor in that bank. And it's really important, given what happened in Cyprus,
Yes.
that these people who are elected officials, some of them are appointed, but there are government officials, they have a fiduciary responsibility to look at risk associated with the existing system. And given that the banks have already gone under in 2008, and given what happened in Cyprus, it's their responsibility to examine what their alternatives are with regards to where they put public tax deposits. And one alternative, of course, is what we advocate for, is public banks.
Exactly. Let's put the funds in the public banks. At least then we know they can't take a haircut.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, that's such a good idea. Thanks so much, Mark, for joining us. I really appreciate this. I really hope that all of our viewers really take it to heart. We have to start moving forward in protecting all of our assets. We know they're up for grabs. That is the bottom line. Ellen's made it very, very plain. I showed that article yesterday that now derivatives have super priority. So they're not only going to just take all the bank accounts and confiscate the money for anybody, and that's including all the schools in the counties and all the districts. They're going to take all of the money accounts. You got to understand that when there's any risk in the derivatives, and it's just a bubble waiting to burst. And then they're going to take all the stocks and bonds account. They're going to take everything, and we need to protect ourselves. We need to move the money, and we need to move the money into a public banking system. And I would say that's basically moving the credit. Let's move the use of our credit, getting loans and that kind of thing, out of the mega banks and into the local economy. And we can do that quickly, easily, cleanly with a public bank. Let's go sell this to our private banks. I, for one, am going to do that. I'm going to go talk to some people at the banks, and I'm going to say, why aren't you supporting this? Let's get on board. That's what it's going to take.
There you go. CJ,
Thanks, Mark.
for all you do. You're a wonderful voice speaking out on lots of different topics, including public banking. So I certainly appreciate it. Thank you for being that clarion call to everyone on the web.
Oh, thank you, Mark. I do appreciate it. I know that you are just really putting yourself through the mill, flying all around the country, working overtime on this effort. And truly, the people thank you. I thank you personally, but the people, when they really start to understand that what you're doing is building an escape route. We can escape the coming disaster if we'll just listen up and do it.
I'm trying to convince Ellen Brown, who wrote Web of Death, that the name of her next book, which will come out this summer, should be Escape from the Web of Death, because that's exactly what it is. It's an escape route.
Exactly.
And her new book's going to be all about public banking across the world, as well as in our history. We've got rich history of public banks in this country.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But we'll escape from this Web of Death sooner rather than later, I hope.
The sooner the better, because we just don't know when this other system is going to collapse. And we know it's going to collapse. We know they're going to take all the accounts, so we just need to have some escape now. So let's push real hard on these solutions. Thanks so much, Mark, for spending the time with us. We so appreciate it.
Thank you, CJ. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You bet. And guys, that's the end of the show today. And truly, let's take it to heart. Let's bugger the bankers, and let's get our public banking escape route set up. Come on, join me. See you tomorrow.
When I was a lass, I was proud of me class, like my father and mother before me.
They taught me to fight for my civil rights,
but it's always the same old story.
the rich reign supreme while the poor can but dream.
Under Labour or Liberal or Tory.
And I say, bugger the bankers and politicians, bugger the bureaucrats too, bugger the buggers who make up the rules. And if you're one of them, bugger you. And if you're one of them, bugger you.
The system is bent and the money's all spent. We're measured from every direction.
The workers get taxed while the wealthy relax, with nary a moment's reflection.
Where there's brass, there's muck.
And they don't give an arse, 'cause they're programmed against insurrection. And I say, bugger the bankers and politicians, bugger the bureaucrats too, bugger the buggers who make up the rules. And if you're one of them, bugger you. And if you're one of them, bugger you.
Now all you good people with passion to vent, don't give up the struggle for justice. But I've done my time on the protesters' line, and these days I show my dissent.